The moment my phone rang at 2 a.m., I knew something was wrong. What I didn't expect was to hear my sister's friend's panicked voice telling me that Emma had been physically dragged out of her own son's funeral by HOA security guards. By the time I arrived, she was sitting on the curb outside the community center, her black dress torn, mascara streaking her face, surrounded by shocked mourners. The HOA president stood nearby, arms crossed, without a hint of remorse. She had no idea I was the state attorney, and I was about to make that the biggest mistake of her life. Before we start the story, please comment down from which country are you watching and don't forget to subscribe. I grabbed my keys and rushed to my car. I was supposed to be at the funeral already, but work had kept me late. Emma had texted they would start without me. Driving through empty streets, my mind raced with anger. Who interrupts a funeral? Who would drag a grieving mother away from mourning her son? When I reached Emma's neighborhood, I saw the crowd gathered in her front yard. The space had been set up with chairs and a small canopy for Tyler's memorial service. I parked quickly and jumped out of my car. And that's when I saw her, my sister, sitting on the ground, her black dress torn at the shoulder, mascara running down her face in dark streaks. Her body shook with sobs as Rachel tried to comfort her. Around them stood about 20 young people, Tyler's friends, looking stunned and helpless. I jumped out of my car, not even bothering to close the door. "Emma?" I called, running toward her. She looked up, her face crumpling further at the sight of me. "Mark, they dragged me out of my own house. At Tyler's funeral." Her voice broke on her son's name. "They put their hands on me in front of everyone." I knelt beside her, hugging her tightly, feeling her tears soak into my shirt. Over her head, I could see a blonde woman in an expensive-looking pantsuit standing near Emma's front door, arms crossed, watching us with cold detachment. Two men in polo shirts with Oak Ridge Security embroidered on them stood awkwardly nearby, at least having the decency to look uncomfortable. "Who did this to you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from Rachel's call. Emma wiped her tears, smearing her mascara further. "Karen Michaels, HOA president." She pointed toward the blonde woman. "She showed up an hour into the service, said we were violating community guidelines about gatherings after 10 p.m. Said we needed pre-approval for more than 15 people." Her voice cracked again. "It's my son's funeral, Mark. My only child." I helped Emma to her feet, my jaw clenched tight. "Wait here," I told Emma gently, passing her to Rachel. "I'll handle this." As I approached Karen, the two security guards beside her straightened nervously. "Mr. Johnson, I presume?" Karen said before I could speak. "Your sister was violating community guidelines with an unauthorized gathering. Section 12, paragraph 3 clearly states." "My nephew just died," I interrupted calmly. "He was 19 years old." Karen's expression didn't change. "Rules are rules. We can't make exceptions." "So you physically removed my widowed sister from her son's funeral?" "When she refused to comply with repeated requests, yes. We have that authority." I smiled thinly. "Do you?" "I'd love to see the legal basis for that." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Karen's face. "The HOA agreement that your sister signed gives us enforcement capabilities." "No HOA agreement in this state gives you the right to put hands on a homeowner," I said quietly. "But we'll address that later. Right now, I'm taking my sister home." I turned away knowing she was watching me. I could have revealed who I was right then, flashed my credentials and watched her crumble. But that would be too quick, too easy. Karen Michaels needed to learn a permanent lesson about abusing power. As I walked back to Emma, one of Tyler's friends approached me hesitantly. "Sir, we recorded what happened." The young man held up his phone. "When those guys grabbed Ms. Johnson, we got it all on video." I nodded, feeling a cold satisfaction. "Send that to my phone immediately." Back at Emma's house, I helped her inside. The memorial was over. Tyler's friends promised to come back for the official funeral tomorrow, giving Emma hugs before leaving. Once alone, Emma broke down completely. I held her, feeling helpless. "I just wanted his friends to say goodbye," she whispered. "Some can't make it tomorrow. This was their only chance." "I'm going to make this right, Emma," I promised, a cold determination settling in my chest. "Whatever it takes." She looked at me with exhausted, red-rimmed eyes. "Oh. The HOA runs everything here. Karen's been terrorizing everyone for years. The Wilsons got fined $5,000 for painting their door the wrong shade of brown. The Garcias basketball hoop was taken down while they were at church. She even had Mrs. Patel's cultural holiday decorations removed and destroyed, claiming they weren't aesthetically consistent with community standards. "Let me worry about that," I said, squeezing her hand. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, after the funeral, I'm going to start making some calls." Emma finally fell asleep around 4 a.m., exhausted from crying. I covered her with a blanket and went to the kitchen, opening my laptop. I wasn't going to wait until tomorrow. I started researching Oak Ridge Estates HOA right then, making notes, building the framework of what would become Karen Michaels' downfall. The next day, after standing beside Emma at Tyler's cemetery service, watching as they lowered my nephew's casket into the ground, surrounded by immediate family but missing all those young friends who should have been there, I began my investigation in earnest. My first stop was the county records office. My colleague Linda looked surprised to see me. "Mark, I thought you'd be taking time off after your nephew's funeral." "This is important," I told her. "I need everything you have on Oak Ridge Estates HOA, the bylaws, permits, complaints, board meeting minutes, everything." Linda raised an eyebrow at my intensity but didn't ask questions. 3 hours later, I had exactly what I needed. The HOA's own bylaws explicitly stated physical enforcement was prohibited. They had no legal right to remove anyone from private property. Even better, I found 11 formal complaints against Karen Michaels filed in the last 18 months, all mysteriously dismissed without investigation. Next, I visited Central Security Services, the company that employed the guards who had manhandled my sister. The manager, Mr. Reynolds, visibly paled when I mentioned what had happened. "We're contracted to monitor community areas and issue parking violations," he explained nervously. "Our guards are not authorized to physically remove residents, especially not from private events on their own property." "Then why did your employees drag my sister out of her house during her son's funeral?" I pressed, keeping my voice level but allowing enough edge to make him squirm. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Ms. Michaels has significant influence. She threatened to terminate our contract if they didn't comply. She told them she had legal authority to order the removal." "I'll need a signed statement confirming everything you just told me," I said. Reynolds nodded quickly, probably hoping to avoid becoming collateral damage in what he now realized was coming. By the end of the day, I had signed statements from the security company, copies of the bylaws with the violations highlighted, and evidence of Karen's pattern of abuse and overreach. I'd also discreetly reached out to 3 HOA board members who admitted Karen frequently acted without board approval. "She calls emergency sessions with just her 2 allies present," explained Mrs. Chin, who had served on the board for 5 years. "The rest of us only find out after decisions have been made. Most of us are afraid to challenge her because she somehow always has dirt on people. It's like she investigates everyone looking for leverage." Over the next week, I built an airtight case. I conducted interviews with 23 neighbors who shared horror stories about Karen's reign of terror. I meticulously documented every violation, every abuse of power, creating a timeline of escalating behavior that showed a clear pattern of deliberate intimidation and harassment. I consulted with trusted colleagues at the state attorney's office, carefully keeping my personal connection quiet while gathering legal opinions. I had to be extremely careful. If this were perceived as a personal vendetta rather than legitimate law enforcement, it could backfire spectacularly. My friend and colleague, Deputy State Attorney James Williams, reviewed my evidence and shook his head in disbelief. "This goes way beyond HOA overreach, Mark. This is criminal harassment, abuse of power, possibly even criminal conspiracy if you can prove the board members were coerced. Not to mention the assault charges for having your sister physically removed." "That's what I thought," I said grimly. "I'll be recusing myself formally, of course. I want you to handle the prosecution." James nodded. "With pleasure. People like this give all community organizations a bad name. But how do you want to play this? We could issue warrants now based on what we have." I thought for a moment. "No. I want to do this publicly. I want to request to speak at their next HOA meeting. I want to confront her in front of the very people she's been terrorizing." "Making a statement, huh?" James smiled knowingly. "Just be careful. Don't let it get personal." "It won't," I assured him, though we both knew it already was. The night of the HOA meeting arrived. Word had spread through the neighborhood that something significant was going to happen, and the community center was packed beyond capacity. People were standing along the walls and crowded in the doorway, all eager to see what was coming. Emma sat beside me in the front row, nervous but determined, wearing a simple black dress, a different one from the funeral, as she couldn't bear to look at the torn one again. Karen Michaels looked surprised by the turnout but maintained her usual confident demeanor in her perfectly pressed designer suit, her cold eyes surveying the crowd with barely concealed disdain. The meeting began with routine business, approval of last month's minutes, discussion of the landscaping budget, a debate about seasonal decorations. I could see Karen deliberately dragging these items out, probably hoping people would get bored and leave before my item on the agenda. But no one moved. If anything, the room grew more tense with anticipation. Finally, after nearly an hour of stalling, Karen had no choice but to move forward. Now we have Mr. Johnson, who wishes to address the board about a personal matter. Her tone suggested this was a trivial concern, barely worth the board's time. You have 5 minutes, she added dismissively as I approached the podium. I placed my folder of evidence before me and surveyed the room before speaking. Besides Karen, the board consisted of 6 other members, all watching me with varying degrees of interest and apprehension. Thank you, Ms. Michaels, I began politely. I'm here to address the incident that occurred at my sister's home last week, where she was physically removed from her son's memorial service by security guards acting under your direct orders. Karen interrupted immediately. We've already addressed this matter privately. Your sister's gathering violated our regulations about noise and unauthorized gatherings after 10 p.m. About those regulations, I replied, opening my folder. I have here the HOA bylaws which explicitly prohibit physical enforcement of any kind. Section 4, paragraph 7 states that disputes must be resolved through mediation or legal channels, not physical intervention. Murmurs spread through the room. I continued calmly. I also have signed statements from your security contractors confirming they were instructed by you personally to remove my sister, despite this being outside their contractual duties and against company policy. Karen's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Those security personnel were acting under HOA authority as designated enforcement agents. Interesting, I said. Because I also have statements from 3 board members confirming you never brought this action to a vote. You acted unilaterally without board approval. Mrs. Chin spoke up from her seat at the board table. That's correct. I never approved any physical removal, nor was I informed that such action was being considered. Karen's face flushed slightly. This is absurd. We have procedures. I also have documentation of 11 formal complaints against you in the past 18 months, all mysteriously dismissed without investigation, I continued relentlessly. Plus signed statements from 23 residents detailing similar abuses of power, including unauthorized fines, personal property destruction, and systematic harassment of anyone who questioned your authority. The room was completely silent now, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Karen stood up, pointing her finger at me, her composure finally cracking. Who do you think you are? She demanded, her voice rising. You can't come in here with your amateur investigation and undermine the authority of this association. I was elected to maintain standards in this community, and that's exactly what I've been doing. The moment had arrived. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my credentials. Mark Johnson, state attorney for this district, I said clearly, holding up my ID where everyone could see it. And you, Ms. Michaels, have committed multiple violations of state law, including assault, harassment, abuse of power, and possibly criminal conspiracy. The room erupted in gasps and exclamations. Karen's face went from angry red to deathly pale in seconds as the implications hit her. That's a conflict of interest, she stammered, grasping for any defense. You can't investigate a case involving your own family. Which is why I've already formally recused myself from personally prosecuting this case, I replied calmly. My colleague, Deputy State Attorney James Williams, will be handling the formal charges. He's waiting outside with the paperwork. On cue, James entered with 2 officers in uniform. Karen looked like she might faint as reality crashed down around her. This is all a misunderstanding, she tried, her voice suddenly conciliatory, the transformation from tyrant to victim happening in real time. I was just trying to enforce the community standards that everyone agreed to when they moved here. Is that what you'd call dragging my grieving sister from her son's funeral? A misunderstanding? I asked, my voice finally betraying a hint of the anger I'd been suppressing. Or is it what you've been doing to this entire community for years? Using your position to bully and intimidate people who can't fight back? Emma stood up beside me, her voice quiet but steady. You didn't just ruin a funeral, Karen. You took away my last chance to say goodbye to my son with all the people who loved him. Tyler's friends, his college roommate, his childhood best friend, they couldn't come to the cemetery. That gathering was their only opportunity to honor him, and you destroyed it because you could. Her words seemed to break a dam in the room. Suddenly, everyone had something to say. An elderly man stood up shakily. She fined me $3,000 for planting vegetable gardens instead of ornamental flowers. Said vegetables were unsightly and reduced property values. She had my children's treehouse demolished while we were at church, called a woman from the back. It was built by their grandfather before he died. She threatened to put a lien on my house because my garbage can was visible from the street, for one afternoon, shouted another resident. She banned my Christmas lights and called them tacky. She had my car towed from my own driveway because it was too old and lowered property values. One by one, residents stood up, sharing their stories of Karen's tyranny and petty abuses. The meeting descended into near chaos as years of pent-up frustration and fear poured out. I let it continue for a few minutes before raising my hand for quiet. As of today, I said when the room had settled, the state attorney's office is filing formal charges against Ms. Michaels for assault, harassment, abuse of power, and several other violations. The HOA itself is under investigation for compliance violations and possible financial improprieties. I turned to Karen, whose imperious demeanor had completely crumbled. Ms. Michaels, these officers will escort you outside to discuss next steps. You'll be given the opportunity to give a formal statement and contact legal representation. Karen was let out, stunned silent for perhaps the first time in her tenure as HOA president. The remaining board members immediately called an emergency vote to suspend her pending investigation, with Mrs. Chen appointed as interim president. In the weeks that followed, justice took its course with methodical precision. Karen faced criminal charges for assault and harassment, plus civil lawsuits from multiple homeowners. The investigation into the HOA's finances revealed she had been skimming from community funds for years, diverting money meant for common area maintenance to personal expenses, resulting in additional charges of embezzlement. She ultimately accepted a plea deal that included 6 months in county jail, 500 hours of community service, significant financial penalties, and a permanent ban from serving on any HOA board or community organization. The Oak Ridge HOA was completely restructured with new transparency requirements, term limits for board members, and a resident oversight committee to approve all enforcement actions. The community center, once the site of Karen's power displays, became a genuine gathering place again, hosting neighborhood events without the cloud of fear that had lingered for years. 3 months later, Emma hosted a memorial service for Tyler in her backyard, the proper gathering she'd been denied. Over 50 people came, sharing stories and memories of my nephew, laughing and crying together without fear of unauthorized gathering violations. Neighbors brought food and flowers, many apologizing for not standing up to Karen sooner, for allowing Emma's original memorial to be disrupted. As the evening wound down, Emma and I sat on her porch swing, watching the last guest depart. "You know what's strange?" she said softly, a sense of peace in her voice that I hadn't heard since before Tyler's accident. "Something good actually came from this horrible situation. The neighborhood feels like a community again. People are talking to each other, helping each other. It's like everyone was under a spell that's finally been broken." I nodded, watching children playing freely in yards that once had to meet Karen's strict aesthetic standards. Gardens bloomed with vegetables and flowers of all kinds. Basketball hoops and bicycles sat in driveways without fear of violation notices. "Sometimes the worst moments reveal who's really in charge," I replied. "And it's never the person who has to drag others down to feel powerful." Emma smiled sadly. "Karen never even knew who she was dealing with, did she? She had no idea my brother was the state attorney." "People like that never bother to learn about others," I said. "They're too busy enforcing their own importance." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset over a neighborhood that was healing from years of tyranny. 6 months later, the county implemented what became known as the Johnson Rule for all HOAs in our jurisdiction, requiring multiple levels of approval for enforcement actions, prohibiting physical interventions of any kind, and establishing clear appeal processes for homeowners. 3 neighboring counties adopted similar regulations after our case made regional headlines. Karen served her community service hours cleaning parks in a neighboring district. I occasionally drove by in my official car while she picked up trash in her orange vest. She never made eye contact, but I knew she saw me. Her expensive house was sold to pay Emma's settlement and other legal judgments against her. Her reputation was permanently damaged. But the community she once terrorized flourished in her absence, becoming a model for how neighborhoods should function, with respect, transparency, and genuine care for residents. The annual block party, once canceled by Karen for excessive noise concerns, became a cherished tradition again, with Emma taking a lead role in organizing it. As for my sister, she started a support group for parents who had lost children. The pain never went away completely, it never does, but she found purpose in helping others navigate the same devastating journey. She often said that surviving both the loss of Tyler and the humiliation at his funeral gave her a unique perspective on grief and healing. Sometimes I still can't believe everything that happened. What began with a 2 a.m. phone call on the worst night of my sister's life ended with systematic change that protected countless homeowners from abuses of power. All because Karen Michaels dragged the wrong woman from her son's funeral, never bothering to check who her brother was. The moral of the story? Always remember that the person you're mistreating today might have connections you never imagined. Or better yet, just don't mistreat people at all.